Hello, Lit in Comp 1. Today we're going to be starting our first book, which is Night. We have some preview activities, some background information to help you navigate through that book, which is about the Holocaust. So there are a couple handouts that you will reference today. I will click them as they show up in the slideshow, and they will also be posted underneath the Google Classroom stream. So the intro activity today is I want you to consider some of these quotes by our author. So Elie Wiesel is a Holocaust survivor. He did just pass away a few years ago. He was in his 90s, but he survived Auschwitz when he was about 14, 15 years old. And these are some of the quotes that he has given in speeches and within his writing, because he was actually very quiet about his experiences for several years after he was liberated, but then became an activist and basically talked a lot around the country and the globe about what he endured and experienced, because he really does want people to challenge and change this, issues of racism and prejudice so that, events like the Holocaust never exist. So take a few minutes to kind of think about some of these quotes. I think a big thing that he believes is you need to take a stance and you need to say something or challenge oppression as it happens around you, because that's part of the problem of why the Holocaust was so quote unquote successful for the Nazis, is because people did turn a blind eye of what was happening. So today we're going to do some preview activities. We're going to talk about another vocab word that I'll use, which is exigence. And then we will start reading chapter 1, and you will actually be taking notes based on content and craft. The goal is to finish chapter 1 for Monday so we can have a discussion in class, and you will turn in your notes for a quote quiz grade. So here's the homework again. We also worked on a Wubbies on Thursday, so make sure you finish that writing. It is due before midnight tonight. It is one paragraph, and then you also need to do some reflection bullet points about what you learned about a Wubbies based on my class instruction or the video that I posted on the Google Stream. So we're going to start with this. You can use this handout. You could also recreate it on a sheet of paper or computer paper, but we're going to look at 7 boxes. What I'm going to have you do is write down what you think about the picture initially in the top box, and then I will click and I will give you some facts and background information, and I'd like you to annotate one thing that stands out to you from my discussion and my background. And you'll do it 7 times, and then we'll talk about which picture stands out to you the most. So write your reactions first, and then use the box right underneath to write some facts or important information. And just a disclaimer, some of these pictures are kind of violent and graphic because that is the time period of the Holocaust. So here's picture number 1. You could tell me, what do you see? What do you think? You could write down some key words. You could write down a question. You could tell me, what is happening and why. You don't have to write a lot. Some kids will just write a sentence, which is perfectly fine. And then if you need to, pause, write it down, and then I'll be clicking. So pause if you need to have time to write, because I'll kind of go through the answers, not answers, but the facts. So this is a Nazi book burning. And so it's really important to realize that the Germans, the Nazi Party specifically, they were very slow and steady about their prejudice and about their control of society. And book burning is one of those things that is always problematic, or book banning. So what happens is they burned the books of people that could be used against their ideology, or they burned the books of people who were Jewish. They kind of completely undermined anybody who talked about humanity, who talked about Judaism in a positive light. By 1939, 575 authors had been forbidden in Germany, and what you're seeing happen is the government is trying to limit knowledge and expression so that they can keep control of the masses. And you can see up here, this is pretty horrible. So like in some cases they take books and they throw them in manure and then burn them, just to really kind of showcase the disrespect of knowledge and writing and of the authors that they were trying to censor. Number 2, take a minute, write down what you think. All right, I'm clicking. So this is a propaganda poster. I want to bring this up. So I took a college class about the Holocaust and got some better information, because a lot of people wonder, like, why? Why did they choose the Jewish population as the population to destroy? Unfortunately, we'll never have a 100% correct answer on that, but because, we can't interview Hitler and most of his people because they have either, were killed, died early, or just never have spoken out of what or why they were trying to do what they did. Unfortunately, Jewish people have endured a lot of historical stereotyping and prejudice for centuries. Part of it is rooted in the fact that some Jewish people lended money. So like, you have a credit card and you use your credit card and you get money off the credit card, but you get charged interest, right? So sure, you can put $100 of clothes on a credit card, but you might be charged $5 in interest after you do that. Jewish people also were kind of in charge of banks or economics, and they would lend out money, and there was a Christian tradition where you didn't do interest, but Jewish people did. So there is the stereotype that Jewish people are greedy, or they're trying to rip you off. But we know today, like, if you borrow money from a credit card, there's going to be interest. You're using that business to buy things. And so for some reason, a lot of people assume Jewish people were greedy or hoarding money. Some people also blamed the Jewish population for World War I. So Germany was destroyed in World War I and had a horrific economic depression as a result of that. And so what ended up happening is there was a lot of political narrative that the Jewish people are the ones that surrendered at the front, or they are the ones that caused the downfall of Germany. And you got to remember, you're starving, there's no good economy, jobs, business, you're a huge country, you've been humiliated in World War I, and then somebody comes up and they say, we're going to make Germany into an even more prosperous nation. That would be Hitler and his Nazi party. So Hitler, as well as all the people that followed him and supported him, they were able to manipulate the large masses of Germany. He was able to get the Germans out of an economic depression, and then basically he was able to focus his hate on somebody, which always unites people in power. And so he focused in on Jewish hatred and prejudice. This is this is also a really good propaganda poster. So you see destruction, you see the German fist pushing out towards the Jew, and then you have this Jewish person that's horrifically characterized as dark hair, dark eyes, a large nose. Those are all stereotypes for a Jewish person. Number 3. Okay, gonna click. So some of you guys might recognize this as the Night of Kristallnacht or the Night of Broken Glass. So this took place in 1938. A lot of people think the Holocaust and the war was in the 40s, and it was, but the actual prejudice and the beginning, use of murder and torture and all the horrible things that, populations endured by the Nazis occurred early towards the end of the 1930s. So what happens is on this night, people just go crazy, the Nazis, and they just kind of go through and they start looting and trashing a whole bunch of Jewish businesses. They destroy the churches. Many people were killed. They destroy cemeteries. And it really is just a glimpse into what would happen for the rest of the Holocaust period. But remember, a lot of people didn't know. We can easily say, oh, on the Night of Broken Glass, we would have, packed our bags and left. But remember, we weren't living in this time period where a huge mass genocide was about to occur. We would have never known that. We would have never known the capacity that the Nazis would have in, systematically destroying, millions of people. And so a lot of people wanted to stay because it's their home. They're scared of where to go starting over. They think it's just an isolated event. And you'll see that happen in Ellie's book as well, in chapter 1. Number 4. Alright, so this is a picture to kind of help discuss the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism means like a hatred of the Jewish people. And I find this picture very haunting, especially because I am a mom. So basically, they did a step-by-step system. In the, it was a 25-point party system. It was part of the Nazis' business plan or political plan. And step by step, they started to strip away the rights and thus the humanity of the Jewish population. And they did it so it was very public. So the destroying on Kristallnacht, making, everybody, child to elderly, wear a star so they physically can be seen and spotted for prejudice. They started to limit their social environments. They couldn't walk on the sidewalks. Eventually, they moved Jewish people into the ghettos, or little areas where everybody had to live, and then the worst of the conditions became deportation to the concentration camps. Some camps were work camps, and some were actually just death camps, where you would be killed instantly upon arrival. So as you start to take away all of the Jewish political, legal, and civil rights, it really was a form of systematic destruction, and it was very, very successful. This one is also incredibly horrifying. So take a minute, write something down. So a lot of people know the concentration camps and the death camps, the crematoriums, the gas chambers, but the reality is the death and destruction that the Nazi Party was using against Jewish people, as well as other, quote, undesirables, it began years before that. The thing I learned from my college class is Nazis are very, very methodological. I can't say that word very well. They're very systematic and efficient. And they wanted to figure out what is the most efficient way to kill large quantities of people, which is horrible when you really think about what they're trying to do. So before the concentration camps and gas chambers, Nazis did mass shooting. So they would organize and rally up a whole bunch of Jewish people in towns. They would march them out into some type of forest area or farm area. They would make them dig a huge trench. They would line the people up and they would shoot them one by one. And the Nazi, uppers, the admin, so to speak, realized this wasn't working because it was actually traumatic for the Nazis to see the people they were killing. And that's obviously completely disgusting and horrifying. But this is why they started to move to the camps and the gas chambers. So it was a little bit, quote, easier for the Nazi Party. But as you can see, Jewish people would do anything to try to protect the ones they love. These are not shoes. A lot of kids think these are shoes, but I'm not quite sure what that stuff is. But take a minute to respond to this picture. So, this is Auschwitz. Auschwitz actually has 3 camps. Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is the death camp with the crematoriums. There's Auschwitz 1 and 2. We'll talk about that map as we get to chapter 3 of Night. So the first concentration camps were set in Germany in the 1930s, which is early. But then they moved quite a few to Poland, because Poland is the first country that the Germans invaded and successfully overtook. And these were their best system for killing mass quantities of people, because you could put a whole bunch of Jewish people into the crematoriums and you wouldn't have to see them die if you were one of the German soldiers. And then they made a lot of the Jewish people and the undesirables that were at the camp take care of the bodies and do all the horrible things because everybody was trying to survive. So you can see this is still existing as like a memorial and a historic site, so people can go and visit and just kind of really process what this camp was and how successful it was. Number 7. Ellie is not in this picture. Some people want to think he's in this picture, but as far as I know, he is not in this. But this basically helps identify the horrors and the systematic death of the Jewish people. So we'll never know the true amount, but most estimates are 11 million people were killed. 6 million were Jewish, so 1/3 of the European Jewish population was wiped out. And when you really think about future doctors, future discoveries, all those people that they killed really have hurt society as a whole. But the Nazis didn't just target Jewish people. 11 million, only 6 or supposedly 6 million are the Jewish population. That still means there's, 5 million people. That included gypsies. Gypsies were considered undesirable because they were kind of odd. They didn't, stay in one spot. They kind of migrated and moved around. They hated Polish people. They hated the Russians. Mental and physically disabled people tended to be their first targeted group because they were easy to, kill or take away because they weren't, paid as much attention to. People that didn't fit the normal Aryan race or the normal ideologies, so like homosexuals were also targeted, or supposed people that were gay. So they targeted anybody that did not fit their perfect German